matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Sweet, we are up and recording. Taylor, hi, how are you?
I
This is my
I'm like,
radio voice.
should I pretend to be happy? I'm fine. I have not been sick for weeks and weeks and feel terrible. Just kidding, I have. And I'm sorry, I'm going to sniffle a lot probably during this as well,
It's okay. It's
which
okay.
is going to be terrible.
There's a lot going on for folks. Taylor's not feeling great, but we're gonna muddle our way through it, and it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, super
Uh,
excited.
Taylor, would you like to introduce us?
I would. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Old friends and new friends. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, where the podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, sometimes, most weeks. And I'm Taylor, joined by Farce.
It was a nice little call out. So I definitely planned my week poorly and never got around to editing last week's episode, or the episode that I was covering the topic of, and so yeah, I'm a little backed up at the moment. So we're gonna go back to our regular scheduling. So this week we're just gonna release Taylor's episode and then the episode I did from the week before. So that is how we're going to play catch up. And Taylor's been very patient with my incompetence, I would say.
No, it's fine. Whatever. No big deal.
Thank you. Um,
Everything's fine.
so you what did you or is this a hint thing or is this not a hint thing?
Um, I guess not really. Um, no, I'm doing something really silly that I can't wait to talk about with you. Okay. No, I don't know if you're gonna guess it, honestly,
All right.
because I haven't really heard. I didn't hear about this until I was. It's another Chicago story. I actually have like a bigger one I'm gonna do next week, but I'm reading a book and I just like was not gonna get to finish it because like Tuesday I spent the day in bed with like I have one of those ice packs that goes over your eyes to like with puffy eyes, but I put it around my neck and like tied it to my head so it was on my throat, and then I just like laid in bed like that literally all day.
You have a sore throat?
Terrible.
Did you
Like
ever? I don't think it's COVID. I never had a sore throat with COVID.
I had a sore throat last time I had COVID, which was like not that long ago, also.
Huh.
But I
Okay.
didn't take a COVID test because I don't have any, and like now, who cares, you know?
I know.
But
I know.
you know what I
Anytime
mean.
somebody
So
gets sick and it's like, oh, I don't know where the COVID test is. I gotta do it. It's like, who cares? What are you gonna do? What it's
yeah,
just gonna tell you have it or you don't. Like, what is?
right. And I'm not gonna like it's not, whatever. I'm updated on all my stuff. I don't think it's gonna kill me, um, but yeah, I know I've had terrible sore throat. So I anyway, so I'm going to get to that one, and I'm excited to tell you that story next week. But this week, I wanted to do another Chicago story that I heard about last 2 weeks ago when I was in Chicago. From my friend Kirk mentioned this to me, and I was like, oh, I hadn't heard of that before. So we talked about a fire in 1871. So I'm going to talk about a flood, and guess what year there was a flood in Chicago? Just for fun, for no reason.
1872.
1992.
Really?
Um, yes.
I guess
So I didn't.
I guess I was too young.
I mean, well, I was not too young because my dad had to leave work early. I'll tell you about it
Well,
in a little
yeah,
bit.
but you hey, two things. You had a direct connection to Chicago, which
Yeah,
makes you
yeah.
remember it, and also you're much older than I am. So
Well, I don't remember it. That's what I'm saying. I know it's so funny how much younger than you I look, even though I am so much younger than older than you.
it's a nice little comeback.
So, the Great Chicago Flood happened on April 13th, 1992. It ended up costing the city of Chicago anywhere between $2 and $4 billion, depending on who you read. But it is we're going to start in the 1890s to get to that flood to get you there. We'll start about 100 years before.
Sweet.
So I think in the episode that we didn't put out yet, were we talking about the subway and how scary it is to be under all those
Yes.
buildings? Yeah. So we'll talk. Well, you'll hear us talk about that in the last one, but I want to reiterate that because man, every city is like huge buildings on top of like wormholes of tunnels. You know,
Yeah, it's like
like
super scary.
so many.
Like you know how if you like stick your finger in like an anthill, you just crush like 50,000 tunnels underneath them. That's what could happen to you in a subway.
Yes, it's like that.
So terrifying.
It's like that in every big city. It's crazy.
Did you
Um,
not think about that
so
until I brought that
Chicago
up?
has also it's honestly I didn't, and I'm so glad I didn't in my over a decade living in New York. Like maybe a couple times, but I didn't have that like in my psyche because that would have been really scary.
Okay. Well, I'm glad it's now embedded there.
Like I thought about it, like I knew it was underground, obviously, but I didn't think about like just the thousands and thousands and thousands of tons above me.
Right. Right. Better
Wild.
not to think about
So
it.
yeah, but I don't think about it. But Chicago is like built, obviously there's a river and like parts of the river they can like move up and down with like different like lock systems and stuff. And there's a lot of bridges. And then also there's a lot of tunnels. So like the train in Chicago, there's like the elevated train, but then also there's a subway that goes like kind of goes underneath and around. So there's that happening in there as well. So it's also wild to me that we used to count on like physical things for so long, like cables, like I don't know, like in new neighborhoods they don't have like phone lines, obviously, and they don't have like the cables that like we had just come to rely on for only like 100 years, you
Wait, is
know?
that true? They don't put phone lines up now?
Well, I don't think so. Or if they do, they're like different. I don't know. I
All
feel
right.
like they probably don't.
Keep talking because there's a new subdivision that was just like completed like a
Okay,
block away from me, and I'm gonna Google Earth it and see if there's telephone cables up.
perfect. Great, yeah. 'Cause I don't think that they do. Or they don't need to as much. Because like I remember when we talked about the um volcanoes, like the first volcano that everybody knew about as it was happening, because
Right.
they had dropped like giant cables in the ocean. Like it needed to be like connected somehow and like, not through the air yet. But there's so much more that we can do
Wait,
through
but
the
that's what
air.
happens now, isn't it? Like, don't aren't we all connected through like that transatlantic cable?
Isn't it through satellites?
We're so scientific.
I don't know. My point is, when these tunnels were dug, in and oh I also like I did see tons of cables in DC. I saw some guys moving cables like through tunnels and the way they do it is with the manholes. So they have to like put the cables in the manhole and then like have a guy underground scoot them over and then like move them that way, and like up the manhole, whatever. I saw them doing that. So still there are still cables, they're all underground. There's so much stuff going on underground. Um and this is the kind of thing that I kind of wish was part of our job when we become famous is I want to like go into these tunnels and like learn and be inside of them, and like see what's down there. Wouldn't that be cool?
No, that'd be horribly, horribly terrifying.
Okay, I'll
I,
do
I
the tunnel part.
you do the tunnel part. I'll just
Yeah.
like I'll get brunch and I'll do my research that way. Hey, I
Okay.
don't think there are this subdivision. So for those of you in Austin, I'm looking at Mueller. There's like no. I've gone many, many blocks at this point, and I haven't seen a single telephone line.
There is or there isn't.
No, there isn't.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Um,
Wild.
we had a guy come, it like flooded in our front yard, and we had to like move some dirt. And the guy came and he knocked like with a tractor, and then he was like, "Do you guys use your phone line?" And we were like, "No, we don't use it because like the house was made in the '80s." And he goes, "Good, because I just cut it by accident." So we used to have one, but not anymore. Um, so let's go back to 1899. You were in Chicago. And I know that, did you read The Devil in the White City? I feel like you might have.
So I didn't read it, but I've listened to enough content around it where I feel like I've read it. It's my way of being literary without actually having to read.
Cool. So I remember there was a part of it where like in this time in Chicago, they're like building so fast that like in The Devil in the White City, they talked about that there were like neighborhoods that had street lights and streets and sidewalks, but no houses. Like they were like the neighborhood was ready for them, for people, because like the city was growing so fast. So in 1899, the Chicago Tunnel Company was hired to build tunnels under Chicago for cables for the Illinois Telephone and Telegraph Company, which was like relatively brand new. Like all this was new. The tunnels were built initially to just run cables through them, but um, Chicago said you can't build the manholes to move the cables. Because remember what I just said a second ago, where like the guys have to like put the cables down the manhole and then like move them over, and they still have to
Right.
do that now. So like they weren't. The Chicago city said no, we don't want all these manholes around, so you're not allowed to do that. So they had to do it something different differently. So they built a narrow gauge railway, which means that like the track itself was like 2 feet, like the tunnel was 7 feet wide, but the track was 2 feet, so it was like a little track. So imagine like little cars on this little track. They built this narrow gauge railway transport cables, so it was all underground. So it was connected um to the street level with like elevators and shafts that were like around the city. So eventually they used it to transport coal and other things and not just the cables. In London, they used what they're going to build in Chicago as an inspiration for their postal underground post office. But there's some like shady things that were happening because this is like 1899. So there was like a strike and they like strike busted and a lot of corruption for things to get built. It changed hands several times, and there were several bankruptcies in like the building of these tunnels for the telegraph. Essentially, though, it worked for what they wanted it to do. They were 40 feet below street level, and the first 16 miles, so which is a ton of tunnels that were built, were kind of built like on the down low. They didn't get the right permits, so they would dig all day, like with hand tools, and like it was like kind of like a clay, like sediment dirt thing. They would dig all day, and then they would take the dirt out of saloon basements at night. So like connect to the basement of like bars and things that were open, and then they'd sneak the dirt out that way. Um, the tunnels were egg shaped, so like this. Make
Taylor's
it big for
making
you.
the profile of an egg.
Got it. They were 7 feet 6 inches high and 6 feet wide. The walls were 10 inches thick, and some were a little bit larger, but that's basically it.
What
So
does
it's
that
like
mean? The walls were 10 inches thick. Isn't it a million miles thick?
no, like no, because there's like some pictures that I'll post and I'll share with you, but they're like you can like go in either direction, because you have to like so that some of them are next to each other
What would
because
I
they like do
Google
different
to like
things.
see what these tunnels look like? A Chicago tunnel isn't
Google
going to do it.
No, Google the Chicago Tunnel Company. But don't Google it yet because I don't want you to know what's going to happen. So
All right,
just
I'm
wait.
going to hit enter and I'm going to open a new tab. Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. So, so the tunneling was, they would do it 24 hours a day, just like get it done, but they could complete 2 miles a year, like, or so, like by hand. Like it took, but it got faster as like they got better at it, and they would obviously do it like in different directions. The dirt would be taken out by mules on carts. And if a building had, and I'm gonna say this a couple times, but like if a building had a deep sub basement, they didn't need an elevator to access it. So that's like a basement under a basement under a basement. They wouldn't need an elevator. They could just like directly connect to the tunnels. Um, the There were electric pumps just in case it flooded, but for the most part, like there was a little bit of natural moisture, but they were like not really worried about it flooding. They did have some watertight doors in different sections just in case it flooded, but it didn't flood while it was in use. Um, the things that they were worried about were like obviously like Chicago is next to a lake and there's rivers, so like flooding that way. But also if a building that was above these tunnels caught on fire and the water used to like
Oh,
do that, that could have flooded the tunnels as well.
got it. Yeah.
So those are kind of what they were worried about. By 1914, 60 miles of tunnels had been dug underneath Chicago. It connected with the like street level. There were 19 elevators that went to different like department stores and like the post office and places where you could where you would want to like deliver things without being like on the street. There were also 5 elevators around Chicago where you could like pick up packages. The general public could, which is kind of cool,
That's kind of cool.
So you just like kind of like an Amazon
Sorry,
locker.
give me a second. Sorry, Luna's like basically doing ray guns routine on the ground here, and
Mm.
it's like creating this like weird, creepy sound where it sounds like someone's like clawing at the doors, but it's just her just like moving her paws on the floor. And
Everything in here got like eerily quiet because there's a guy working on the shed outside and he stopped sawing. So I don't have like the sawing in my head and I'm like,
was I
um,
muted the whole time I just said that?
no, I heard you.
So weird. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So basically they have the Amazon locker you could pick up on the street level, which is cool. There were 132 electric locomotives, and there were like hundreds of excavating cars and coal moving cars. Obviously, you can move coal through these as well. That was something that was like really popular because they use coal all the time during this time. Um, by 1920, so after like 20 years of being in use, they removed all the telephone cables and they only used it for commerce, for like moving packages and coal and things back and forth. Um, there's cute pictures of like the engineers. They're basically on like a little toy train,
Yeah,
like the kids would go on in a park. Yeah.
that's how it is under the Capitol, where they
Yeah.
have that underground thing, the
Yeah.
railroad thing. It's not called the underground rail. You know what I mean?
So it's also like, I mean, what a job. You're like underground all day in this like little railroad. Wild. Um, so they did try to use it for like the regular USPS, but it didn't work. They couldn't like get packages places in time. So it just got like a different way to send things, mostly like wholesale goods and things. So um this was really useful at the time because, like the street level people are like just getting cars. There's horses everywhere, presumably horse poop everywhere. You need another way to get around. Um, as they started to build the Chicago subway lines, they took over some of the tunnels or made them wider, but for the most part, they like didn't run into each other. Um, in the 40s, in the 1940s, trucks got better delivering coal. People didn't need them as much. And then also, like I said, been a lot of like corruption and back and forth with who owns it. So they tried to make some money selling the air in the tunnels for air conditioning and heating because it was like cooler down there during the summer. So they would push the air up into like a theater or like a big building to make it a little bit cooler. And then same in the winter, but the air would be warmer in the tunnels. So they would shoot the warm air up into buildings. So they tried to make money that way. But by 1956, nothing was working and the tunnels were abandoned. So now we have 60 miles of abandoned tunnel under Chicago, and we're going to forget about it as a people.
Crazy.
Cool. So now it's 1992. The Bulls have two-peated. They have one more to go. Ghostbusters 2 came out in 1989, so we know the dangers of tunnels.
Yes, that was a documentary. I recall that.
Now we know. Um, so the Kinsey Street Bridge in Chicago needs new pilings. So as we know, Chicago,
I hate
lots of
this story
rivers.
already.
There's lots of rivers, and a piling on a bridge is like the sticks in the ground, you know.
It's the
And then whatever.
foundation on which the bridge is built.
Yes. So it needs new pilings. And the old pilings are too close to the bridge tender's house. This is one of those bridges where traffic stops and it goes up
Yeah.
and
But
then
yep.
boats go through. So somebody has to work there. So they can't move the pilings because they're worried that the engineer's house is going to fall into the river. So the city of Chicago says you can build them 3.5 feet away. So just like a little bit away from the last ones, they're going to build the new ones. And these pilings went into the mud or whatever. And the rumor is that those pilings themselves punched a hole into the old tunnels, but it wasn't that. Like they moved the earth and then like that eventually displaced earth caused the hole. So it didn't happen like immediately, but it happened like with the pressure from the pilings,
Sure.
you know? So eventually, it's going to punch a car size hole, like car size across, in one of the old tunnels. But they didn't know that this was happening. They didn't know they had done that. I mean, they didn't know that it had happened. It was like a slow roll. Like it didn't, and the tunnels had not been, let's see, the tu tunnels had not been taken, like obviously maintained. So like a lot of the flood doors they had built in the beginning were no longer there. It was just like empty tunnels, you know?
Yeah.
So this happens about like a year. I think like I read a bunch of articles and I think like almost a year before the flood is when it like starts happening and then it's going to kind of start to get like worse and worse. So a cable guy, telecommunications guy found the leak. Like he saw it. He was like, it's leaking down here. Like there's water coming in.
I don't get it. So somebody went down into the ton, this abandoned tunnel. Who are these people?
Well, it said a telecommunications worker, so I think this is like a guy who has to lay more cables because you're like, well, now we need cables for what was it called? Direct TV? I don't know, whatever. Pay per
Such a
view.
scary job.
Such a scary job.
God,
I'll
I'm
be down there
so
though.
glad like
Going down there.
I just chose like working in technology. Like
I know. Otherwise, you'd be a tunnel digger.
It's like every time I see that show like Sam Bro, like Dirty Jobs, I'm like, thank
Not for
God you
me.
people exist because if not for y'all, like, yeah, I would
Yeah,
never have done this on my own.
totally. So this guy goes down there and he is like, it's a little too wet down here for my tastes. And he tells someone, and everybody is like, that isn't my fucking problem. Like, not my problem. They're like, because the tunnels now, it's been like 40 years since they were shut down. And they go underneath like private buildings and places that people who like own a building and didn't even know they were there. So they're like, whose problem is it when these tunnels that exist that don't really belong to anybody, that have been essentially foreclosed on, like need help? Whose problem is this? And they
Right.
can't figure out whose problem it is. So nobody wants to have responsibility. And in the meantime, like the pressure is just building and building and it's just like slowly leaking and it's going to eventually flood, you know? So in the meantime, it's building and building. And so Chicago's downtown is called the Loop. Do you know this? Do you know this?
No.
Chicago's downtown is called the Loop. It's just like a
Now I know.
area
Thank you.
area you can drive around. That's what downtown's called. So in the Loop, which is where like the big buildings are, like downtown, um, on the early morning of Monday, April 13th, 1992, the basements in the Loop start to flood. And people are like, this is weird. Like, every basement is flooding at the same time. Like usually, like if a water main breaks, it'll be like one basement will flood, or like two, but like all basements are flooding. The Army Corps of Engineers happens to be there, and they get a call, and they're like, the guy who answers the phone is like, it's not raining. Like what the hell? Like what? How could it be flooding? Like
Yeah.
where is it coming from? Um, and because there wasn't water in the streets at this point, it's just the basement starting to flood. So like this something weird is happening. All basements are flooding. But as it gets worse and more basements start to flood of like big department stores, of like the Hall of Records, like all these buildings are flooding. They cut the power in the Loop. So they turned the power off in the downtown business district of Chicago, around like 10 in the morning, and that's when my dad had to come home because the computer stopped working. You couldn't do anything
Why
anymore.
does that help the flooding?
Well, it doesn't help the flooding, but it helps people from getting like electrocuted.
Right.
You know.
Okay. Water and electricity. Got it.
Yeah. So they cut the power and everybody has to go. So there's just some great photos of like people in their 90s clothes like walking through puddles, but it's like sunny and they're like walking over like big hoses as people try to pump the water out of their buildings. Um some of the buildings with the deep basements have like up to 40 feet of water inside the basement. There's a lot of damage to things that are stored like really low. So in this, I have a Chicago Tribune article that I'll show you, and there's a woman who works at Marshall Field, which is like the big department store there, and she's like sitting on the stairs looking at like a flooded basement, and the basement that's flooded is the third basement, which is such a scary word, don't you think?
So
I know you
it's
agree with me.
three basements down.
Yeah.
How dark it is in here right now.
So I feel like that's one of the scariest things that can exist. But nobody knows where the water's coming from, right? So it's like starting to be like noon and it's been flooding for several hours, but they don't know where this water is coming from. They don't know why all these basements all around Chicago are flooded. So finally, someone at this big building called the Merchandise Mart is like one of the biggest buildings in Chicago. When it was built this is incidentally, when it was built in 1930, it had its own, it was the largest building in the world and it had its own zip code until 2008. It is a wholesale, like showroom building where you can like buy furniture and buy things. It was owned by the Kennedy family, and one of Bobby Kennedy's presumably not idiot children ran it very successfully for a while. In 1983, the Sultan of Brunei spent $1.6 million at the Merchandise Mart to furnish his entire palace. He said it was the only place where that task could be completed in 1 week, which is
Pretty
hilarious. I'm
nice.
like, have you been to IKEA? That was my thought. And then I looked up, I know you have not. This is such a non sequitur, but for our readers, in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, there's a part where she furnishes her whole apartment at IKEA in like one go, and it's so fun because she just like buys like 10 chairs and a bunch of beds and like stuff, and it's just like imagine just being able to go and get whatever you want.
Like how
So
you
fun.
started saying, have you read? And I know you haven't. And you just like skip right past it.
I skipped it because when we first started, I was looking at the stuff that she bought in her apartment because people have obviously like figured it out and like put it all on blogs, and it's just really fun. But so anyway, that's doesn't matter. But this big building happens to be next to the bridge that had been repiled recently. And so there's a radio reporter named Larry Langford who's listening to the police scanners to try to figure out what the hell's going on. And he hears a call that someone from the Merchandise Mart building calls in and says, you know, we know that all the basements in town are flooding. I've heard that in the news. But in our basement, there's fish. So like I feel like we're probably it's like probably coming directly from the river, because there's fish in here.
Right.
And and also there's a vortex outside in the river. Should that be there? Basically like a drain in the river right next to the bridge.
Freaky.
Um, so Larry from the radio reporter drove there and got there before the police, because he was like, I think this is it. I think this is where it's coming from. So the vortex is essentially this hole, and it's bringing the water in and then going through the tunnels and then pushing out the top of the tunnels through the like elevator shafts and the um like all the things they'd built in the past that people had just forgotten about, you know? So that is what's happening. They finally figure out that's what's happening.
Is there be some
Eventually,
like more? Is there like a scientific reason? Like water doesn't naturally go up, right?
well, it's
Water
coming,
tries to hit sea level. Oh, so if the basements were below where the river is,
yeah.
that's where you okay.
Yes. Yes, because some of the basements like are up to like the door of the tunnel also.
Got it. Okay.
you know? And then as the tunnels get full of water, it's gonna rise, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, so eventually they have to like send someone down there to be like, what is down there? Like they don't know. So they go down, they find the hole. By this time, the hole is 20 feet wide, and they just start throwing shit into it. They throw rocks, they throw mattresses, they throw cement. They're like, how can we plug up this hole? Like, this is going to be a problem. They're able to drain the river a little bit around it because of the lock system, until someone is like, we have this. Um, New cement, potentially from the Army Corps of Engineers, potentially from a man named Brian Rice of Material Service Corporation or Kenny Construction. I saw something different in every single article I read, but they find a new cement that's like quick drying and they're able to like quick setting and they're able to use that because they drill holes on like the other side of the tunnel where the hole is and fill that so they're able to kind of stop it. Like they don't plug the hole, but they like make new holes on the other side and make essentially those waterproof doors that they should have made in the first place
Yeah, makes sense.
and then stop it. Incidentally, the Army Corps of Engineers, they are in charge of like highways and rivers, and they're as old as time. They were created in the Continental Congress on June 16th, 1775, which I think that was cool. I didn't know
Yeah.
that they're that old. Um, it took days, obviously, to clean up and reopen. It cost the city of Chicago between $2 and $4 billion. It said that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and other stock markets lost like billions of dollars in trading that day because they weren't able to do anything. In And people had to like commute differently. A lot of the subways were closed for a while, and they had to like have like alternate ways around it. Businesses were pumping water out via huge hoses. So for the next like couple of weeks, there were just like huge hoses and dehumidifiers and stuff trying to get all the water out of these basements and sub basements of these huge buildings. Insurance wanted to call it a flood because you know how you need separate flood insurance
Right.
than your house, but flood was like not exactly what happened. It's not like it was like a flood because of nature. So they called it a leak. So they were able to get insurance money. So some people call it the Great Chicago Leak and not flood.
Insurance companies, they'll find a way.
Yeah.
But
Um,
they'll try at least.
it's never really been decided whose fault it was. Some people were saying that the new pilings went right into the tunnels, and that the people who were putting those in should have known that they were there, but they were like, we didn't know that they were there. And it seems like not many people knew that the tunnels were there anyway. The way that the tunnels usually worked underneath the Chicago River is they like went with the river scary, under the river with the river in the middle of the river, right? But this bridge, the Kinsey Bridge, was one of those bridges at the time that it was built where it had a pillar in the middle and the bridge swung rather than lifted.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure this is really helpful.
The
So
visuals helping.
the bridge swung, and so the tunnels were built around that middle piling. So maybe they assumed that the tunnel was in the middle of the river, like it was in like 90% of the bridge cases, but in this case it wasn't. It was on the side.
Okay.
So like it's unclear like if they knew that or not. But eventually I think it just like went to court and like some people were in trouble for it, but no one like went to jail or anything, and nobody died, which is great. Um, so they did some things to kind of fix it. So, they put in those waterproof doors. They wanted to make sure that it doesn't happen again if any of this happens, but the tunnels are essentially still there. One of them collapsed recently when they were filling it with cement to just close it up when they were building a road above it. So like there's still, like you said, like there's like anthill of holes like all around the city of Chicago, and I'm sure many other cities as well. Um, and I also found two t-shirts on eBay that say I survived the Great Chicago Flood of 1992. They're vintage from 1992. Um, I thought it
It's
was really fun.
fun.
I'll put those online as well because people started making t-shirts like right away so that they could have them. And that's it.
So basically the city paid for all this.
Yeah.
Um 'Cause I went to floods are such a nightmare. Like it is like
Yeah.
one of the worst things that happens like in nature because it literally just ruins everything. Like you will never get that smell out. You have to just like tear out drywall and maybe
Yeah.
even like some of the studs to get out of the system. But it's interesting too because I was in Houston like I don't even know, like maybe like a month ago and even then you see the after effects of flooding where
Hmm.
things are just downed and then I was about Houston specifically because like it happens like every
All
hurricane
the time.
season.
I
Every
know.
hurricane season, there's pictures of somebody on the roof of their car on like a highway or something, and
Oh
they're
my
trying to like
God.
get through a flood, and it's like, man, you gotta get out of there. So at least
Houston
this
is
isn't a
at,
natural occurrence for Chicago,
yes, which is great. Yeah, Houston's 50 feet above sea level. Um,
which seems like a lot.
I mean, hold on, I want to sneeze. Um, Not enough. I'm 3,000 feet above sea level, I
How far
think.
above sea level am I?
Yeah, I'm like
Nearly
2,700, I
500
think.
feet. All right, well, I'm safe.
Yeah, the kids one time were like, what if the ocean like floods all the way up to here? I was like, if the ocean floods all the way up to our house on top of this mountain, then like we're fucked.
Everybody else is already dead.
Yeah, everyone else is already dead. Don't worry about it. Um,
So
yeah,
was this litigated? Did this go to court?
it looks like it did, but I don't know exactly what the answers were. Because like the companies that were involved in like making the tunnel were gone. So like no one owned the tunnel anymore, just kind of existed. And I think that the company that put in the pilings, they were not in trouble for it. Because they were able to prove that like they didn't know they were there. But in the end, like the city had to pay for it anyway because there was so much damage. It just kind of like came out of nowhere.
So apparently, okay, keep talking. I gotta Google something.
Okay, you let me know. You're the lawyer. Um, No, I think what you're saying about flooding, I remember when there was a big flood in Florida one time looking at people's houses when there's just like water all the way up to your kitchen counters. Like everything in your house is garbage now. It's
All
crazy.
garbage. And also, you know what it is like I have this like thing in me where when I know what is coming ahead is just gonna be horrible and arduous, I just want to like give up right then and there. And with a flood, it's like this is my life for the next like this smell and all of this shit. It's just it's a way
Yeah,
of life. Like your way of life just literally changes because you got to work around the fact that now my carpets are full of mold, so now I got to hire a contractor. The contractor's late, and then the drywall guy showed up before the floor guy. It's just like
I
such an
know.
awful nightmare.
We have friends in LA who bought like a big, beautiful house like up in Los Feliz and it flooded like a water main broke. They had to take it down to like the studs. It was terrible.
Do I
And they
know
sent us a
them?
video. No, they sent us a video of like they have like a walk-in closet and it was just like a waterfall like going all over all their stuff. It was terrible.
And in that condition, like the literally the best you could ever hope for is please let insurance cover at least some of this. In a
Yeah.
lot of cases, like I said, they'll find a way not to cover any of it.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
apparently, okay, so I was wondering this because I
Great, you
remember
tell me.
a while ago that there was some talks about Chicago filing for bankruptcy
Oh,
because they were in like a horrible, horrible financial condition. And I was looking it up, like what you were as you were talking about how the the debt obligation that they incurred on the cleanup was, yeah, like you said, like $2, $3 billion, about $4.5 billion as of today, which even for a city of Chicago size, like an unexpected $4 billion. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like it's like for me or you to be like, oh, by the way, you need to come up with like 70 grand for something. It's like, well, that's not that easy to just pull out 70 grand out of my ass like tomorrow.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and so apparently Chicago is the number two most financially precarious city in the US due to, well, due to a lot of things, but a part of it has to do with debt. So I would imagine that this also contributed to that.
Yeah.
Can't help.
Yeah.
Number
No,
one is
totally. And
Detroit.
oh, it wasn't that long ago, also. I mean, it was like 35 years ago, whatever, but it yeah, I'm sure they still have like debt from it, you know? Because it's just like unexpected, like you said. Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Are there pictures you want me to look at?
Yeah, let me show you this article. It's cool. This article is like just I'm just gonna copy the images from it and put them online because it's from the Tribune. I think it's like an old one, so like the words are kind of weird, but the pictures are great. So it's like you can see people like just like in a basement, like what are we gonna do? You know, you can see the pilings and people walking through the streets. You see a guy 2 days later with the I survived the Great Chicago Flood t-shirt.
They did this in like 92, but they made it look like it was like 1850.
You know, I like all these are black and white. This guy, this guy, this like this old guy holds a fish he found. Great.
Wow. Yeah, that Marshall Fields, I mean, the fact that what is underneath her, oh my God, that's so scary.
I know. Like, what is he even in there? What is she gonna do? It's so scary.
Blood sale. Yeah, of course, sell everything. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. So yeah, look at
You know
these
what's crazy is like, yeah, you're right. That's only 32 years ago, but man, we looked different back then. Like,
We did. We did. And I mean, Chicago guys really look like those Saturday Night Live Chicago guys.
I know. I
Like
know. They
that
all
is
look like they
not a
have a
fucking
heart
joke.
condition.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like I just like you could Chris Farley could be any of these guys and like his like starter jacket, you know, like banging on his chest. So good. It's so fun. Yeah.
This also reminded me of that one episode I did where there was that company who had built all those underground tunnels for the salt mine,
Hmm.
and then it was abandoned many, many decades or whatever, century later, and then somebody was like building something on top of it, and then like drilled through it, and all of a sudden it like caused a vortex that
Yeah.
flooded all of them.
Yeah.
Which is again another terrifying stuff like that just freaks me out. I don't know why I can't handle that. I have such weird phobias that have like they're not rational phobias. Like nobody should fear tunnels, but like
No, I think everyone's have fairy tunnels. I was in London one time and with like very cool people in like a very cool wine bar that was like in an old tunnel like under the ground, and so like the wall was all like like a dome, and you're like entering this dome, and I had a panic attack. And the guy I was with was like, "This has been here for like 300 years, Taylor. Calm down." And I was like, "This has been here for 300 years." So I have to get out of here. And I
yeah,
hated
you
it.
don't, yeah, 300 years and maybe a day. You don't
Today's the
know.
day. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
who
like,
knows?
this for brand new? And I'd be like, maybe. Like, this is, oh, you telling me it's old? Like, I'm just like, get me out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
He was unimpressed with me, but I was like, I'm not doing this. No way. Um, cool. That's it. End of my
Well,
Chicago stories for the time being, but I'm sure there will be more.
I'm sure that I would love if you wanted to ever cover the reversal of the Chicago River. That'll be kind of fun.
Oh yeah, that does sound fun.
Yeah, because that also sounds terrifying and like what are humans doing?
Actually, I don't. I mean, there's so many. Like I was thinking we could do like obviously like so much mob stuff that you could do there. And there's oh, what else? Just like the politics is interesting too. Like there's like seven mayor dailies or maybe two, but I want to know more about them.
One of the pictures is a Mayor Daley,
I
Richard
know.
Daley, walking
Yeah.
down the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the mob stuff, the crime stuff. It's funny because the politics of the mob are kind of like the exact same thing. So it's just
Oh, totally.
which
Well,
is
I feel
which.
like we might get there when we like, I feel like it's probably similar because like I know we want to talk about Tammany Hall in some way. Maybe we can like do that together somehow. Like think about somehow. I mean, we just have to do it, but like we can just like figure out how to do that, you know? Um,
It could be a thing where we do like like parallels of like
yeah.
Tammany Hall, and then like you do that, and then I do like more modern politics and how like one mirrors the other.
Yeah. That could be fun.
Well, sweet. Thanks for sharing.
Cool. You're welcome.
And I'm going to promise to edit this on time, unlike
Cool.
this week
We're
situation.
fine. We are busy. It's gonna be a couple months of craziness. It's fine.
Yes.
We're fine.
Yes.
Everything's fine.
Sweet. Anything you want to read out?
Nope. I no, just thanks everyone. Please tell your friends and we'll keep going.
Boom. Love it.
Boom.
Okay. Also, doomtofallpod@gmail.com,
Oh yeah.
on the socials at doomtofallpod, and wishing Taylor a speedy recovery from her latest COVID diagnosis.
I know. I'm like slowly fading. Like I could feel my face getting just full of snot.
On that note, we're gonna go ahead and cut this off. I'm
Okay,
gonna
bye.
stop recording.
Bye, friends.